A slumber party episode. You know, that kind of reminds me of that one episode from Hugto last year that Murayama wrote. Oh, he also wrote this episode. Dude really seems to enjoy writing stories about girls having slumber parties. Not judging or anything, I'm just saying I'm starting to notice certain writing patterns between this and the Red Dominatrixes. Following right where we left off last week, Lala's ship had received a message from her planet. The sender, as many had guessed, was her brother, or to be more exact, her older twin, Roro. He informed them that they had uncovered the power of the princesses. And finally, after over a month, they got around to changing the OP. Points to integrating Uni a little better than some previous 6 Rangers, but damn, it was awkward seeing 2 versions of her in the OP. Which, yeah, speaking of which, they also changed the villain's crawl significantly, adding the now awakened Darknest and, Emo I1? Okay, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm kind of interested in seeing where they'll go with this, if only for reasons I'll get to at the end of this review. After the OP, Abraham clarified that the message was actually pre-recorded data that the ship had picked up during their last trip to the Hoshizora Galaxy. He correlated it to a plot point from this director's version of Spaceballs of all things. Though, to be fair, Spaceballs does do sci-fi better than most actual sci-fi these days. And before anyone brings it up in the comments section, yes, I know this title is actually a pun on the Japanese translation for Star Wars, but I prefer to relate it to Spaceballs, so shut up. Anyway, this was also Abraham's first meeting with Uni, and I think Elena might have tried to change the subject to avoid the whole space phantom thief thing, since Abraham did have connections with the authorities. It's never actually confirmed, but it's an interesting thought. Regardless, they decided to all head to Lala's planet to find what would turn out to be a star pen. Though Lala was actually against the idea, I'm guessing because she didn't want to introduce her future waifu to the folks. Understandable, as introductions to the parents have never really worked out all that well in this franchise. In order to discourage her friends from going, Lala mentioned that it might take a whole week to traverse her planet. But, as it just so happened, it was summer break for the Earth Cures, and Abraham even volunteered to provide cover-up stories for their parents. Thus, Lala had no choice but to reluctantly agree. The next day, Hikaru and Fuwa arrived incredibly tired, having spent the entire night pondering what Lala's home planet would be like. Well, I'm sure this won't lead into anything bad, and provide us with yet another reason to blame Hikaru for everything. Anyway, sure enough, once they left Earth's atmosphere, Lala's pendant pointed towards Cancer, which, yes, unfortunately means to any Pisces out there, your sign is going to be last. Sorry. I just find it interesting that's one thing this series shares with Forze. And Fuwa was going to warp them straight to Lala's planet, but was too tired to make it all the way there, instead missing the mark by a few light years. So yeah, just as a reminder, everything that happens from here on out, you can blame it on the pink. And speaking of things that never seem to change in this series, we get the same old back and forth between Darkness and his main lackey, What's-His-Face. We detected the star pens, my lord. Go get that power for me. It's like clockwork with these two, and every time I see them, I'm starting to care less and less about these villains, except for maybe one guy. Hey Capard, how you doing, man? I mean, you've been holding up the villain side really ever since the beginning of this series. That's gotta be doing a number on your back, dude. Anyway, the titular pajama party commenced, with the girls donning their garments, Lala being my personal favorite by the way. Though Hikaru, shouldn't you be catching up on your sleep? Oh wait, I forgot who I'm talking to. Never mind. And going back to Hakuto 12 that I brought up at the top of the review, we start to see even more repeating patterns, with Hikaru busting out a VHS, a video format that we watched back in modern day youngins, with the label Jumaskic Park. If only we could go back to the days before the overusage of CGI and obnoxious SJW characters. But yeah, as you can tell by the crude label, it was actually a recording of a TV broadcast version of the movie, likely including a cut that never made it onto future releases for various reasons. This did actually happen a lot with old 90s movies, and surprisingly enough, even makes Waterworld kind of watchable. It's a nice little detail that almost distracts me from the fact that Hikaru somehow managed to hook up her really old VCR onto a monitor on Lala's ship.
This is some ancient Super VHS output or something. I can't connect it to your float screen.
And it doesn't take long before more Hugto 12 comparisons arise, as the yellow again can't handle scary movies, and the upper class girl is a serious movie buff with an appreciation for practical effects. Though honestly, even if it is a little recycled, at least we're giving something for these two to work with. Heck, I think even Murayama agrees with me, as we'll see later in the episode. Anyway, as they were watching the movie, a figure with a rather iconic silhouette was looming in the corner. Oh, please tell me it's going to start singing Hello My Baby. Anyway, they eventually finished watching the movie, much to the relief of Elena and Lala, who just found it boring, like most of you kids these days. Hey, just be glad they didn't suggest watching any of the awful sequels. And of course, being the most practical member of this team, Uni wisely decided to take a literal cat nap while she could. Still, she did wake up in time for a little roundtable discussion with her team where they, or more specifically, Elena and Madoka, exchanged stories about how they convinced their parents to let them go on their little adventure. It's actually really good stuff, as we finally get to learn a little more about the cures that the other writers have no idea what to do with. For Madoka, we learned a little bit more about her family's history, in particular how they used to protect royalty from demons through their archery. Sound familiar? She also mentioned that she was planning to study abroad after their summer vacation, which, yeah, we'll see how that works out. Might not be as long as Reika's, so it might not be that big a deal. But yeah, a nice little bit to illustrate the lineage that Madoka had to live up to and how she saw it as something only natural. This contrasted with Elena, who had far more immediate concerns than lineage, in this case leaving her parents to take care of her siblings in her place. Being good parents, they saw it as no big deal, with even her mother clearing up her schedule for her.
Hello, this is Kaeda Amamiya. I'm sorry to trouble you, but I'd like to rescue your army.
Damn it, you little brats! You missed on Aihi Tagaki's perfect English! Seriously, next year we better get Precure voiced by Chris Yukine. But yeah, it's good that they're clearly trying to make up for the lack of development for the sun and the moon. And even though she's gotten the lion's share of screen time, again, really questioning who's supposed to be the main character in this show, they did give a little time to Lala to explain why she didn't want to introduce her friends to her family, as she saw herself as the weakest link in it. Hikaru assured her that wasn't the case at all, as the whole reason her grandfather let her go was because Lala would be with her, which does do a nice job of tying things back to even an underwhelming Yamada episode. Uni mostly stayed out of the conversation, but clearly listened in, and as a result, they all grew a little closer. All of this emotional stuff touched the aforementioned intruder on their ship, who was an alien hermit crab. Well, she doesn't seem, but at least she's not involved in one of the cringiest sci-fi scenes ever. Seriously, I know I keep asking this, but whatever happened to good sci-fi? The crabomorph was named Yan Yan Yan. All three of you need to take speech classes. Maybe go see this guy. Anyway, since most of this episode was dedicated to the cures rather than the obvious victim of the week, things quickly went south as Kapart found them and launched an attack while doing his best Tekkaman impersonation. He damaged the ship to the point that they needed to make a crash landing. From there, Kapart somehow knew there was a crab that he could use to power his weapon. Okay, when did he acquire clairvoyance? Well, whatever, we finally got another zero-gravity fight. Kapart bragged that him and his minions held the advantage, as only one of these girls had fought in zero-gravity once in this series. However, thanks to the bonds that they forged through their little slumber party, even physically coordinating with each other was hard, the Precure was still able to come together in the end. Though that said, this fight didn't really reflect that sentiment all that well, as it was unfortunately a little on the short side with way too many stock attacks from everyone. But what we did get from Hikaru vs. Kapart was at least good, and again, I'm just glad we're finally getting more of this kind of action. And even mind that again, Uni got the finishing blow, as it does actually make a lot of sense in this context. Well, sorry, but that's what happens when you guys always go for the randos. Lala's ship had suffered massive damage and was pretty much grounded. However, to repay the Precure for saving her, Yan Yan offered to lead them to her planet to get repaired. Thus, the episode ended with Prunsu pulling a Kirby and blowing their ship into orbit. This was a really fun episode, as not only did we get even more movie references than the actual movie-making episode, but we finally got a little more even distribution of character development for our main heroines. Now, if we could do the same for the villains. I will say, it's a shame that every time Murayama comes back, it involves some degree of damage control, in this case, trying to fix the Forgotten Ones. As a result, I almost get the feeling like he needed to dig up his Hokuto 12 script in order to streamline his writing process and give as much development to Elena and Madoka before his script's deadline. It ultimately worked out really well, as previously established aspects of both characters were further expanded upon between living up to lineage and sibling responsibilities. But again, my condolences go out to the poor guy. It certainly didn't help that these villains are really starting to get stale. Galogra and Darkness are pretty much just props at this point, and after 2 straight weeks of Tenjo, I don't have any hope for that character anymore. Kapard is at least entertaining, with even his somewhat meta commentary, and here's hoping the OP is hinting at something interesting for I-1. Really, I'll take anything at this point. Also, yeah, while I did sort of exaggerate, I am kind of getting frustrated at Hikaru and her lack of any foresight. Girl, if you need sleep, then get sleep. Don't throw a slumber party. Look at where that got you and your team. Still, overall, a fun episode with good development for Elena and Madoka that I'll likely miss when the next writer rotation begins. Currently, I'm working on my review for Miracle Universe. It might take a little while, as I am experimenting with some new filming techniques, and I've also gotten really into FGO's Dead Heat event. Guess who wrote himself a summer umu? Anyway, look forward to it. Until then, don't farewell for now, my friends. And I think I'm gonna go remember the good old days.